This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Yes. So a very timely topic that we have now is we are faced with this horrific situation where we have over 200, I think it's 240 hostages that are being held by our enemies there in Gaza, exactly where they are. Right, Israel is making tremendous headway in destroying Hamas and finding these tunnels, but have besides one who was released, who was saved, who was rescued, um, we have not found any of these hostages. Of course, what led to this present situation was when Israel, in order to free Gilad Shalit, a soldier, Israel released, I don't know if it was 500 or 1,000, uh, more than 1,000 of these Palestinian terrorists from our jails, including some of the leaders of Hamas today. So, how do we view this whole idea of freeing hostages? The Mishnah will soon see. We'll see the Gemara. We'll see a Mishnah. We'll see a Tosfot discusses the idea of raising funds. That's the classic way of called pidyon shvuyim, redeeming hostages, coming up with sums of money, fantastic sums of money at times, in order to redeem hostages. Very, very famously, the Maharami Rottenberg, who was the Rebbe of Rabbeinu Usher, found in all of our Gemaras, one of the leading poskim, and when he was imprisoned based on these trumped up false charges, and they were demanding an exorbitant sum, and the Jewish community was ready to shell it out. He prohibited them from doing so. We'll soon see a mission that deals with that. He prohibited them from doing so. We'll soon see the mission will discuss why that is. And he ended up dying while still imprisoned and only being ransomed out afterwards so he could have a proper Jewish burial. So we begin with the Gemara in Gittin, Daf Nun Ches Amid Aleph. We have it both in Hebrew and in English. Tana Rabbanan, which is the very beginning, the first side of the page of sources that we have. Ma'aseh Rav Yeshua ben Chananya. It happened. The great Yeshua ben Chananya shalach l'krach gadol shebaromi, and he went to a great, large Roman city. Amr lo, and he was told there. They said to him, Tinuk echad yesh bebeit hasurim. There's a young boy in the Beit HaSurim imprisoned. Yefei einayim v'tov ro'i kutzusav mesudrot lo taltalim. Right? And he is of beautiful eyes, attractive appearance, curly hair arranged in locks. We'll have to discuss why this would be of any importance. Halach, he went there, v'amad, and he stood al petach Beit HaSurim, by the entranceway of the prison. Amar, and he said, Mi natan lemeshisa Yaakov, v'Yisroel levozazim. He quoted a pasuk from Yeshayahu, from Isaiah, which begins, Mi natan lemeshisa Yaakov, who gave Yaakov over for spoils at the hands of our enemies, v'Yisroel lebozazim, and who gave Israel over to plunderers. Right, very timely pasuk for what we just dealt with. Ana ototina, that child responded and said, with the end of that pasuk, he completed that pasuk from Isaiah. Halo Hashem zu. It is, behold, it is God. Chatanu lo, we have sinned to him. V'lo avu bidrachav halok, we did not want to go in his ways. V'lo shamu b'torato, and we were not listening, obedient to his Torah. Amar, he then said, Rav Shua ben Chananya then said, Muvtachani bo, I'm certain, Shemora hara b'Yisrael, this child will grow to be such a great Jewish leader that he'll be the one who'll be Moreh Hora, issuing halachic rulings, giving guidance to Israel. Ha'avodah, which is a way of swearing. She'eni zaz mikan. I will not move from here. Ad she'efdenu, until I will redeem him. B'chol mamon, with all and any amount of money sheposkin Allah, that they are decreeing. Amru, and it was said, Lo zaz misham, true to his word, he did not move from there ad shepoda'o, until they had redeemed him, b'mamon harbe, with a lot of money. V'lo yu yomim muatin, and it was not that long ad shehora Rabbi Yisroel, until he became a great a great teacher, a great leader of Israel. Umanu, and who is this? Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha. Right? Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha, of those who remember the Gemara in Brachos, where we have Tanya Amar Yishmael ben Elisha, that he was a Kohen Gadol who went into the Kodesh Kadashim. We learned that Gemara together, and he there encountered this vision of God. And Hashem said to him, Yishmael b'ni barcheni, give me a bracha. Right? Incredible Gemara in Brachos, Tav Zayin Amud Aleph there. Now this seems to be a bit strange. This seems to be going against an explicit Mishnah also there in Gittin. What does the Mishnah there say? Right, the middle of that page. Ein podin et hashvuyin yater al kamei al kedei demehen. We do not redeem captives for more than kedei demehen, for more than what is their value. Why? Mipnei tikun ha'olam, for the good of the world, in order to fix the world, in order to keep the world running properly, smoothly. The Gemara will discuss it in a minute. Ve'ein mavrichin et hashvuyin. We also will not allow captives to, or will not help them escape. Mipnei tikun ha'olam, also for the good, for the betterment of the world. Rashi Megalil Omer, Mipnei takanat hashvuyin. We're not concerned about the betterment of the world, we're concerned about the betterment of the captives. So when we say over here, let's take the second half first, and then we'll delve into the first half. So for the betterment of the captives, we won't help them escape for the betterment of the captives. What do we mean? Tikkun, what do we mean for the betterment of the captives? How is it for their own good?
If they get caught, it's going to be worse for them than that.
I'm sorry?
If they get caught trying to escape, it's going to be worse for them than the situation.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that, Alan. Right? If the person wants to escape, right, and they want to take that risk, right, that's fine. But should we be going in there to help them escape or not? Esther? Okay, right? So the Gemara says the difference between the Tanakama, the first opinion that said we won't help them escape because of the good of the world, as opposed to Shimon Gamliel who said we won't help them escape because of the good of the captives, right? The difference is if there's just one captive. So according to Shimon Gamliel, help them escape, right? Because we're not concerned what they'll do to the other captives. Whereas the first opinion says, no, for the good of the world, if we'll help, even if there's only one captive, if we help them escape, then the next time that they'll be captives, they're going to be gagged and bound, and who knows what they'll do to them to prevent. So therefore, we're not going to go in there because we're afraid what it's going to lead to. How about the first ruling of the Mishnah? Don't redeem them more than their value because of the tikkun ha'olam, because of the good of the world. What is the good of the world over there?
Not to encourage.
Okay, so one way of looking at it is that we don't want to incentivize, like Allah said, we don't want to incentivize people to go ahead and encourage them, incentivize them. Hey, this is a lucrative business, right? And that's what goes on in many parts of the world. This is a very, very lucrative business. Yes, Dov.
About me, this person's more important than you other guys, and that's a bad thing for the world to see.
Okay, so Dov is saying that we might redeem one person from more than another person, and that's a bad thing for the world to see. Look, I don't know if I agree with that. But, it could be the family could come. This family could come up with it, right? Let's take a look in the Gemara. The Gemara again, just down a little bit. The Gemara ibayalahu. Hi, this mibnei tikana olam. When we say because of the betterment of the world, is it mishum duchka detziburahu? Is it because it's going to put too much pressure on the community, right? All of a sudden, we have to raise more and more and more money. Each time it's going to get out of control. So is it because we can't overburden the tzibur? O Dilma, or perhaps mishum delo ligravu v'laitu tvei, in order that they will not, as Allah was saying, they will not be drawn to this and grab additional hostages because they know that they can get much good for that, right? Actually, I would imagine, though I hate to try to figure out the minds of diabolical killers, but I imagine that Hamas had in mind over here and initially they were asking, release every single Palestinian that might be in terrorists that we have in our jails, release every one of them, and then we will release the hostages, the women, children, some soldiers, but many old people, some literally infants or children, right? And I think Israel, after what resulted after the Gilad Shalit prisoner swap, Israel. I remember talking to an Israeli, and who has many siblings in the army, and he said the sense in Israeli society is we can't go down that road again. As tragic as it is for the individual hostages, we, we see what happens. We see the result of the last prisoner exchange. A difference between these two opinions, right? The first one being too much pressure on the community. The other one being that it'll lead them to seize more such hostages. The difference would be, let's say, the father of a hostage is a multi-billionaire. So he's not asking for a cent, for a single cent from the community. He'll take care of it himself. If the issue is that we can't put pressure on the community, no pressure whatsoever. In such a case, we will allow the father to go ahead and redeem at whatever amount they're asking and he's willing to give. But if the reason is, and this is in fact halacha our concern, that this will encourage and incentivize other such kidnappings, then we won't allow that father, that billionaire father, who's not asking for a cent from anyone else. There's absolutely no imposition, no burden on the community. Nevertheless, we won't allow that father to go ahead and do the release. So how does that pan out with us over here? Over here, where they're not asking for money, right? They're asking for other release of other hostages. And how does this jive with the Gemara that we saw just a moment ago, right? In the same tractate, that a tremendous amount of money was used to redeem this child over there. So I don't have a translate. I'll translate for you. On the sheet, on the very bottom of side A, we have the Tosafot in Gittin. Tosafot were the different Spanish, French commentators who worked through the Gemara. Rashi works more on the Gemara in terms of giving us the simple understanding of the Gemara as we're reading it. Tosfot has a much broader view and will contrast all these different Gemaras and say, well, how does that work with this Gemara over here? And by doing so, he'll also arrive at what we call pshat, at the understanding in the Gemara, but not so much based on a focused look at our Gemara, but in contrast, these other Gemaras, then we can understand it fully. So Tosot says there, the second Tosot, the low ligru, the third of the wide lines there, the low ligru, like they won't seize more and capture more. V'had Tanya, that we learned elsewhere, Perak Nara, this is the Gemara Ketuvot, Nishbit, Vayimivakshimenu Ada Sarbadamim, Am Rishon Podeh. There was talking about a person redeeming his own wife. So there we said up to 10 times the person's value, the wife's value, right? He will pay it. Shani Ishto. Tosa says a person's wife is different. Dahavya Kegufo. A person's wife is like a person's self. Ishto Kegufo, the Gemara says. A person's wife is like an extension of you yourself. Yoter mibito dahacha, even more than the case we didn't see the Gemara brings over here of daughter. Va'al atzmo lo tiknu shelo yitain kol asher lo ba'ad nafsho. We might restrict a parent for giving something for even his own child. We won't restrict a person from paying for himself or herself. Right? A person can give whatever they want for themselves. And a person's wife is like themselves. Ishto kegufo. The Tosfos is bothered by that Gemara there in Ketuvot, where you were giving more than 10 times the value. That's different. That's for yourself. For yourself, yes. Your wife is, or husband, wife, is like a single unit. And for oneself, one can. And then he asked from the Gemara that we started with, for Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, de Pirkei, de Parkei Lahautinok, and the case that we learned before, Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, who redeemed that child, b'mamon harbe, with a lot of money. It doesn't say how much it was, but he swore, ha'avodah, I will not move from here. And he gave mamon harbe. That's later on in Perek HaNizakin. L'kaman later on, Daf Nun Chet Amud Aleph. Lefi shahaya muflag b'chachma. Tosfos has two reasons why that's different. Either because this child was muflag b'chachma, he was off the charts when it came to wisdom, and we'll need to analyze that in a moment. I'm going to share with you a beautiful piece from Rabbi Jafter, who we had here as a scholar in residence a number of months ago, as a Eruv consultant and a wonderful scholar in residence. So there it's different. That child was wondrous, muflag, off the charts in terms of his chachma, and therefore that was considered to be a different situation. Inami b'shat chorban abayit lo shayach the lo ligravu. Interesting. I'd like to hear your ideas on this. Tosfos says at the time of the chorban abayit, right? This is Rome, after the destruction of the temple, and so many of us have been taken out, slavery, imprisoned. In the time of the destruction of the bayit of the temple, lo shayach, we don't apply this concept of the lo ligruvu, that we don't want to incentivize them. How do you understand that? Why is that? Why is it different at the time of the Chorban Abayit, at the time of the destruction of the temple, that we're not concerned, that's going to incentivize them. We're not concerned that it will incentivize them. We're not concerned about that. How would you understand that?
We're amongst the nations now where
And therefore what?
It's not like attacking Israel.
Okay, so we are decentralized. It's not a general, but it's still be attacks against
Or just-
Jews.
Well, they can attack other people as well. It's not specific.
It's not specifically against Israel. Okay.
But can I ask you a question?
Just one second. Let's just Alan, want to say something on this?
Well, it's not like you can every day destroy a temple, right? Like, it's not like you're giving them incentive that, oh, when one day we'll rebuild it, they might come back and do it again. Like, this was such a big.
No. We're saying at the time of the destruction of the temple, then the whole concern of incentivizing them is off the table. That concern is off. We're not talking about incentivizing them to destroy the temple. That concern that if we pay them a lot of money, they'll kidnap even more people, right? That's not a concern during that time period of the Chorban. Esther?
Valuable because they're more vulnerable, and so there's there because you want to make sure that in the dispersion that people are.
Okay, interesting. Esther, you want to say that we've got to get everybody back no matter what, right? Right. I was thinking that at that point it is so out of control already that there's no incentivizing that we're going to be adding. I mean, we were let out of Jerusalem in chains, right? The famous arch, uh, such a crazy world. I think the Arch of Titus was lit up with the Israeli flag after the massacre, right? The Arch of Titus, which of course has the Romans leading us into exile. Whatever. The world's a bit of a nutty world. Yes, Mordechai. I'm sorry. You want to say something before Mordechai?
I had a question going back a little bit. You said like yourself, but what about just every Jewish person supposed to see like love like themselves as well?
Yes, that is true. Mordechai reis v'hafta l'reacha kamocha, love everyone else like yourself, but this is truly yourself. In other words, we have v'hafta l'reacha kamocha, right? We also say chayecha kodem, right? If it's your lot, you should love your neighbor like yourself, right? Love your fellow like yourself. But at the same time, if you're walking in a desert and you got a flask of water and you're walking with someone else, and there's enough water in there to keep one person alive, if you split it in half, you're both going to die. So what do you do with it? Chayecha kodem, right? So yes, v'atlarecha kamocha, but that does not bring it up to make it literally yourself, right? Yes, Allah. Your life comes first.
I think maybe at that time the existence of Jewry was at stake. That's why everybody's like now the existence of Jewry. We have a state, we have strength.
Yes, now we have a state, we have strength, and I think one of the parallels that came to my mind after October 7th, on the heels of COVID, is that our false sense of security keeps getting shaken. Right, going into COVID, we had a real sense of security. We've got all the diseases under control and all of this under control, and I go for my checkups and I eat well, right? And I get my, and all of a sudden along comes this microscopic, and it turns the whole world upside down. The whole world upside down. Our false sense of security, and I think also in terms of Israel, that we can't okay, don't misunderstand me. We have to have this Iron Dome and all of these and David's sling and all of it, right? And we need to make sure that we're doing well and that we're getting the proper funding and we're getting and the army maintains its qualitative edge, etc., 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 etc. But ultimately, Im Hashem lo yishmor ir shav shakar shomer. If Hashem is not going to be guarding it, then all of that which we have will be in vain. And we saw that. I'm not a navi to say, and this is why we lost that protection. But our we every time I say Shemona Esrei now, when I say Melech Ozer Umoshia Umagain, the God who the King God who's Ozer, who helps, Moshia saves, Umagain, and shields. I think about that's the true Magain. That's our iron dome. That is our shield, right? In Hebrew, what do they call the iron dome? Kupat Barzel. Yeah.
But still, that doesn't answer the question why at that time, no matter how much money you spend, you should
Okay.
buy. And today, you have.
So I think during that time, it was such a desperate time, and it was so out of control that we had to do whatever we could do for anyone, and we're not going to have these societal, yeah. So let's come back for a moment. Israel's policy of not leaving any man behind, right? And giving more than 1,000 released terrorists to get back Gilad Shalit. I think that was done initially. Eliezer, hey, go outside and talk, okay? Thanks. So that was done in order to maintain the morale. Initially it was done to maintain the morale of the soldiers, because they knew that no matter what, Israel will go to all ends of the world to bring them back to their family. At this point, I think it's become clear that it's a sign of weakness, and that's going to endanger that many more soldiers and society and civilians all along the way. So I think that became clear that we're not going down that route at this point. Yes, Dov.
So I had thought, okay, the Romans destroyed the base of and the people said, you know what? They went too far. We're not going to give in to them at all.
Okay. Let's go back to that question that we had before, right? And the question that our Rajapter asks, and it's a clear question, but his answer, I think, is very important. But let's discuss it a little bit first. He quoted a pasuk, right? That's what we began. When Rabbi Yoshua Hanania, he went to this Roman city, heard there was a very good-looking young man there in the prison. He quoted a pasuk. The child finished that pasuk. Here's a kid, he said, who's going to be a leader, a guide, Mora Hora, offer teachings, guidance. So he knew a pasuk. He knew a pasuk. He knew a verse. Right? When the army
Smart and good looking.
at long last, when the army at long last came to many of these yishuvim along the Gaza border, and the people were afraid to open the door because the terrorists outside were saying, we're IDF, we're Tzal, and they weren't sure was it a trap or not. So they called out Shema Yisroel, Hashem Elokeinu, and everyone answered Hashem Echad. Right? They started calling out these psukim to make sure that they are hearing from one of the soldiers. Right? He had to, finish psukim. He had to talk about Rosh Chodesh. I mean, he had to really make sure that, right? So this child over here became Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha. This child knew that pasuk. Why does that indicate every child who knows a pasuk is going to become a Mora Harabi Yisrael? What was so special about this pasuk that this child knew and had it on his tongue? So what was the pasuk? The pasuk, we go back to the beginning over there. The pasuk began, Mi natan lemeshisa Yaakov, v'Yisrael lebozazim. Who gave Jacob up for spoil, for plunder, and Israel to the plunder, to the robbers? And the pasuk continues, Halo Hashem zu chatanu lo. It's Hashem, to him we have sinned. Below we didn't want his paths, haloch, to go on his paths. Below shamu b'torah, we didn't listen to his Torah.
He didn't blame Hashem. He accepted.
He didn't. Yeah. In other words, we live in a world of, in general, I'm a victim. I can't be held responsible. I've done nothing wrong. I'm innocent. And it's society, it's this, it's that, right? And you hear it from the defenders of Hamas. Well, it's fine. Only because of what they call the occupation.
Excuse me, 18 years and no electricity generation left?
You don't have to convince me. You don't have to convince me, right? There was a wonderful article from Murphy Brown. I've got the interview there from Gaza, and he kept shooting down the interviewer, saying, "Is this collective punishment?" And he said, he said, during World War II, was anyone differentiating between? He said there has to be a certain responsibility if they elect them as their leaders. During World War II, no one was differentiating between saying, well, these are the German citizens, only go the Nazis, right? Any citizens, right? And then he spoke about how they were all celebrating. And the guy said, well, there's 2 million people there, So he said, well, if this was a random 200 and every single one of those 200 were celebrating and there wasn't anyone there who was saying, this is disgusting, this is inhumane, this is barbaric, this goes against Islam, right? If no one's saying that, that's a pretty good indication that is where they are at, right? So here's this child. Well, let's go on page 2 to Rabbi Jachter. Yes.
He also said that reporter, that the Germans, when they did their atrocities, they drunk themselves to death.
Right.
They were
Yeah.
ashamed of it.
Yeah.
Well,
here they celebrated it.
Those
Yeah.
Palestinians, wherever, they were gleeing.
Yeah. So Rabbi Jachter writes on side 2. He asked the question, right? Our story is essentially simple. While it's impressive Charles was able to complete the pasuk, how does this demonstrate that he is an extraordinary scholar? Does knowing one pasuk verse indicate he'll become a great halachic authority? As a first, the second paragraph now. As a first step, the pasuk and the child's immediate response, indicating his internalizing its message, expresses inclusion in community. Although isolated in a Roman prison, the child states, Chatanu, we have sinned. We, including himself in Am Yisroel. Quite the opposite of the Ben Russia, of the famous Ben Russia of the Seder, of the 4 sons. The young lad is not self-centered. Instead, he sees himself as part of a much greater entity, Am Yisrael. Moreover, by citing the pasuk, the child assumes responsibility for his suffering. He does blame the Romans, and he does not. He does not. Right? And he does not cast himself as a victim. This stance represents the beginning of his redemption. And this, I think, is very important during this time that we're going through, right? Famously, I think it was the Belzer Rebbe, a famous idea is that when we want to fight anti-Semitism, if we're only fighting the anti-Semites, it's compared, if you throw a stick at a dog, what does the dog do? He grapples with the stick. And we have to deal with the boss. We have to deal with why Hashem would allow such a horror to come our way. The boy's attitude contrasts sharply with other suffering groups who, instead of assuming responsibility for their plight, cast the blame on others. This disempowering attitude serves only to perpetuate their difficulties. Rabbi Yoshua, living on the heels of Chorban Bayit Sheni, the destruction of the Second Temple, recognized that the Jewish future depends on leaders who will promote the attitude of the young lad in a horrid Roman jail. Since he felt we needed such leadership so desperately, he was willing to pay any price to ransom this young man. Moreover, by including himself in a pasuk in Yeshayahu, written hundreds of years before his encounter with Rabbi Yeshua, the boy shows that he views himself not only as part of the Jews of his days, but rather as part of an even greater entity, the Jewish people of the present, past, and future. Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, right, from Yeshiva University, is fond of citing Ramban, who refers to this great entity as Knesset Yisroel. Knesset, we have a Beit Knesset, right? It's the gathering in, it's the community, it's this one single entity of Yisrael. And I think one of the effects of that horrific day is that people recognize who we are, what we're a part of, who our friends are, and who our enemies are, or who our friends are and who are those that we thought were our friends. I mean, I'm going to vent a little bit. When I hear about these countries recalling their ambassadors, my sense is good. And let those countries know that their ambassadors are not welcome to come back. Right? You want to recall your ambassadors when we are defending our lives and the lives of our children? Then it's okay. Good riddance, and don't come back. Even the South African ambassadors, I think they're the first ones who should be given the boot, right? Yeah, but this I think this gave us a sense of history, that we are part of this nation that has been through. On my trip, we went to, I mentioned this when I spoke on Shabbos, we went to Rab Nebenzal, Shlita, who is very, very old now. He was the chief rabbi of the old city for many years. He's a well-known tzaddik. And when someone posed to him how we're supposed to feel about this issue, his response was, he's a much older man than any of us there, right? The Jewish people have been through, right? And we will persevere. We've been through and we will persevere. And I think this gives us the sense that, as he saw by this young lad over here, this recognition of being part of this incredible, uplifting, devastating at times journey of the Jewish people. And when he saw that he was willing to connect himself, that he was intimately connecting himself to that, he recognized that there was greatness over here with this child. And I think for us to recognize that we are part of this, we need to do everything we can, everything that we can to protect ourselves and to help and to be a source of strength to all those who have been hit that much more personally than many of us have been hit. But at the same time, we need to raise our game in terms of our avoda, in terms of our service to Hashem. And right, clearly, as this Mishnah had stated, right, that if it's going to incentivize more, I think it was the Gilad Shalit that helped incentivize this debacle over here. And I, again, even from families who have people who are taken hostage, at least the ones that we encountered, there is a sense of strength, and that we cannot capitulate. Esther, yeah.
Because Gilad Shalit was a soldier, and these people are civilians. So is there a difference in trying to release a soldier than a civilian?
Look, I think we have to do whatever we can to free them, but we cannot capitulate. And I think Israel will be very strong. We're not going to have a ceasefire, right? Well, what I understand is we are opening up for 4 hours that every day. Fair enough. Fair for civilians to leave. Yeah, I'm okay with that, right? What I'm not okay with is a 3-day cessation, and then they're going to dig in more, and who knows what else they're going to do. But personally, look, I'm not the one making these decisions. Surprisingly, they haven't called me, right? I'm not the one making these decisions. But personally, to allow civilians to leave, I'm okay on that. I'm okay on that.
Were there any rabbinic decisions made with Gilad Shalit, or it was mostly by the army?
I don't know. I don't know.
I think once you show that you are ready to concede anything, you are done. And the other thing I wanted to say is about the ambassadors. When the country that the ambassadors are in is under attack, we take our ambassadors out. Everybody does that.
Okay, they were not recalling their ambassadors for their own safety. They were recalling someone who would want to recall their ambassadors for their safety, gesundheit. But my understanding was they were recalling their ambassadors because, right, in protest. And I say, don't take them back.
Which countries were those?
I don't have a list. Nikki Haley is taking names. I'm not sure. I'm not sure who it was. Just one other thing I wanted to bring up is why the emphasis on this kid looking good.
Well, it's so unusual.
So unusual. Okay, Dove.
Because romance would do something immoral with him. That's another emphasis to get him out.
Okay, that doesn't seem to be right. Dove is saying that if he's a good-looking kid, then he's rife for abuse by the system over there. But we didn't give that as a reason.
No, but that's another reason.
Yeah, but the Gemara didn't give that as a reason. So why is that significant?
Perhaps that even though he was captive, he tried to still take care of himself and the goof.
So I was thinking along those lines that if he was still looking good, it means not just that he's paying lip service to what he said, but he has fully internalized it.
Like Joseph, when in captivity, he still looks.
Yes, right. Mordechai said, like Yosef, even in captivity, right? If a person could recognize that wherever they are there in Hashem's embrace, even in the most difficult of situations. So perhaps, again, it's just a thought, perhaps the reason why it was significant that this child was, as it was described over there, right, attractive appearance, curly hair arranged in locks, that this kid was actually living his emunah, living his belief, living his faith. And again, on that trip that I took, meeting with the families of hostages and meeting with, Natalie and I we're hoping to have had a Zoom meeting with Yossi Malka, the one who lost his son. That's the family that we're going to connect our community to. We were scheduled for it. He called and apologized. It's the Shloshim now. It's the 30 days now. So a lot's going on. They went to visit their late son's commander, who was injured and in the hospital. And it was just a bit overwhelming for them.
Mhm.
Right.
Hearing all the details. Yeah. But the strength and of these families and of the people, that's what I thought of why this child was attractive in appearance, meaning that they are living with that emunah, with that faith. And once Yisroel Hanania saw that this child was not just quoting a pasuk, but was actually living, and he was the embodiment of that pasuk, that's when he realized that great things would come over there.
Yeah.
There's one thing that
I was gonna say also, like, when you look at all the hostages, when you see the kids, you feel most angry about that. It's like all your hope dies if the kid is not rescued. This is a spokesperson for freedom. It's the future.
I hear that.
Healthy,
I
ready
hear
to
that.
start a new
Yes,
future.
Janet?
So two things. One, I was in the car getting here. The good of the world part, the early tractates and stuff. It occurred to me there could be also the opposite way. The time that those people in captivity, they're not doing mitzvot, or just like this youngster maybe kept his emunah, but think of what else he could be doing for kiruv.
Yeah, but what's the
And
cost? But what's the
so-
cost?
So when, if you say the redemption of hostages for the good of the world, I've heard what you said about, it could encourage further kidnapping or captivity, which didn't occur to me first. But on the other hand, to get them out, then there
Yeah.
could be others. You could be missing the next great cancer research.
Yes, but how many future cancer researchers are going to be snatched if we incentivize such behavior? Yes, David.
The story of the young boy reminds me of the book of Daniel. And he did not regret, or he did not refuse his culture just because he was taken into captivity.
Yeah,
He kept it.
he kept
And
it.
when the king gave him the king's meal
Yeah,
and food, he said, no,
yeah,
I want my culture.
yeah,
And he kept it, and he kept his appearance.
yeah,
And he was one of the wisest men of
and became one of the top advisors. Yeah,
So
yes, yes, Esther.
I was just gonna say, when you give up hope, you kind of give up on yourself. You let yourself
Deteriorate.
go.
Yeah,
And so he still had hope, because his hope was in Hashem.
yeah,
And it's like those stories from the Shoah that you hear, where people who, if they had still a purpose, even in the midst of
Right.
all that was going on.
Victor
somehow-
Frankl, Man's Search for
Yeah,
Meaning.
they somehow
A
survived.
classic. Yeah,
I also heard some Israeli saying that having those hostages and trying to save authority is like winning a battle and losing a war.
is what?
That putting the fate of the hostages as a main goal, saving the hostages, is equivalent to winning a battle but losing a war.
Yeah, I hear that.
So number two, what is the final halacha? Maybe not in this day and age, since we're after the Korban of the second temple, but what were the Chazals? Which school of thought?
So even if the person, right, we're concerned about the greater tikkun ha'olam. So even if a person says, I can afford it, I don't want anyone else to chip in, we're concerned what that will lead to for others.
Right.
Yeah, and that's how
So
we
that was the
decide
final
over there.
halacha.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you all for joining. May we be able to share share good news and good tidings about the topic of today's lunch and learn. Yes, Ken.
Regarding the whole question of the hostages and the question of justice, life for life, Hamas has pretty much demonstrated that it is an organization of death.
Yeah.
And the fact that Israel does have approximately 4,500 Palestinians in their prisons. Can an equivalence be set up whereby that Israel would take, let's say, all of the prisoners if necessary, starting with Mohammed Dahlan,
Okay, and
take them out, saying, we are willing to release our prisoners for the Israeli hostages. And we are now in negotiations. Put a gun in Mohammed Dahlan's mouth and pull the trigger. Negotiations are now open.
look, listen, Ken. I think I got where this is heading, right? Look, I don't think two things. I don't think we want to descend to their depth, and we do that, we're going to start to see pictures of them mutilating our brothers and sisters. So
If they kill our hostages, we should kill.
look, there is talk in Israel about reinstating the death penalty for those who are actively involved in the massacre of October 7th.
First off,
Yeah.
it's not, sorry, but I think of this.
What are we gonna bench?
Descending to their level. This is actually a matter of justice. You start executing them every 2 minutes. If they threaten to execute the hostages, you increase it up to